Hey, welcome once again to ClassroomUSA.net, Street Level America, and USAHeartbeat.com. I love America. I totally agree with the founding fathers. They did a lot of work. I believe it's brilliant in the branch of government, in the branches of government, co-equal branches of government that they came up with, and we've been running successfully. I know we have our flaws. We need to fix some things, but to totally trash it and do away with the Senate and the Supreme Court and the presidents, like some of the Democratic socialists are talking about right now, is insane. Our founding fathers thought this through. It's worked for 250 years, and there are some people right now that want to throw it out. We've been talking with Michael Keating about the Christian roots of America. Remember the old TV show Roots? Going back to your roots? Our roots are in Christendom, and our roots are in a grounded form of government called co-equal branches, a constitutional republic, I believe. I hope I got the term correct there. The co-equal branches of government: House, legislative, House, Senate, the judicial, which is the Supreme Court. Don't pack the court, you just turn it into another legislative body. So you have the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the executive branch. And they each have checks and powers so that not one branch has more power than the other. The Democrat socialists want to give all power to a House of Representatives, where it become kind of a Politburo, if you will. And it's scarily similar to Marxism and communism and socialism. What we're talking about with Michael Keating is the Christian roots in America, and what was in the founding fathers' minds when they came up with this form of government. Michael, thank you for round two of our discussion about the Christian roots in America. And I believe we're going to start it off. I'll let you take it away, but we going to kind of join where we left off at the Articles of Confederation.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Pastor Dave. It's great to be back here again, talking about one of my favorite topics. And yeah, we're going to pick it up and we'll jump right in. To do that, I'm going to share my screen again. And Pastor Dave, you got some comments. You just stop me whenever you can. And let's see what I have to do here to shell out.
That's fine. I'll just listen along with everybody else because I love history, and I think the founding fathers were spot on. This government worked for 250 years, and dripping it up and throwing it out and starting off with something else is not a good idea.
All right. Well, oh, here we are down here. I'm looking for in Zoom. That's a little different than Teams. Here we go. I'm sharing. Do you see my screen?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Again, I get a little bit of Zoom dashboard overlapping my screen. So I might ask for Pastor Dave's help if I got something towards the top that I can't read. But let's get this presentation maximized here. You still okay?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. And my clicker's working? All
Yes,
right.
they
Looks
are.
like we're ready to go. Um, So, to start with, let's just back up a little bit here. I talked a little bit about that chair, Washington's Rising Sun chair. It's really a national treasure. And I went back and I added an inset so people could see the rising sun. Okay, I talked about it, but we couldn't see it. So there's a picture of it in the upper left there. That's what's the engraving in the back of that chair that Franklin looked at during the convention and wondered if it was a rising or a setting sun. Just really a treasure that hopefully your audience members can, at some point in their life, have a chance to see that. We
I
talked
would
about
love
the
to. That's
ratification process of the Declaration of Independence. It's kind of where we left off. We touched a little bit on Articles of Confederation, which is coming next. But I just want to revisit one thing that I actually got wrong. I watched the program back, at least part of it, to check the quality of the slides here, and was a little bit surprised how I said something. So we're going to go back and clean that up. Uh, so the Constitution was approved by the Second Continental Congress on the, I'm sorry, not the Constitution, but the Declaration rather, on the 4th of July. And it wasn't until the 19th of July, though, that they called for an official copy to be created. They called it an engrossed copy on parchment. Okay. Now, I had read an article that kind of talked about it being inscribed, so I imagine this was a some kind of an etching process. But as I looked at it deeper, it's not the case. And this is the official document right here that we talked about and looked at last week. And many people probably think this is in Thomas Jefferson's handwriting. Yeah, I had that impression for a long time because everybody knows Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, right? Well, he did. He wrote the draft copies that this copy resulted in. And the process was that they called for well, he's kind of like the official scribe. He was the secretary of the Congress. In fact, the guy that they called, his name was Timothy Matlock. Now, I don't know how many people have ever heard of this gentleman. I certainly had not. But the handwriting on this document is his. And he was known for his, beautiful script handwriting. And so he endeavored to get the official copy down on paper off of Thomas Jefferson's, and of course had Adams uh, and Franklin's notations in the margins as well, and as well as the rest of the Congress that had met to debate the document. So we don't really know at this point in time, at least I can't deduce on those draft copies who made what comment. But it also is rather difficult for me looking at the copy to think that they just handed Timothy Matlock these 4 pages and said, have at it. I don't think that was the way it went. He took, I believe, what was it, 11 days? Well, maybe more than that. But in any event, it'll tell us here. And he's an interesting guy, by the way. He was actually the secretary of the First Continental Congress in Carpenter Hall. And we talked quite a bit about Carpenter Hall in that First Continental Congress in the last session. And he was, played a instrumental role at that time. But he became a clerk to the Second Continental Congress as well, and then he engrossed the United States Declaration of Independence on parchment. Uh, and the 50 delegates of the Second Continental Congress began signing it on August 2nd. Okay, so this was the ratification process, and it was unanimously adopted by all 56 delegates on the 4th of July. So they technically adopted it, and there was a window of time from the 19th on till they signed it on the 2nd of August. That was the creation of this official copy that we all know and love today. Matlock went on, to play a role in the Revolutionary War. He actually crossed the Delaware River with Washington's army, going on to the Battle of Trenton. So, he was a witness to more than just this history. But I wanted to get that straightened out. That is a handwritten copy. It's not an inscribed a type of engraved process, and that would come a number of months later, or they would do that. We talked about the inkwell, and then we'll flip ahead to where we left off at the Articles of Confederation here. Now, this was America's first Constitution, and we were under this until the Constitution ratified in 1789, was 87, 89. It took the place of this document. And this is, again, a work of the Second Continental Congress meeting in Independence Hall. And many regarded this as an example of the thoughts and the real intentions, the original intent of the founding fathers. Often look back to this document. And Abraham Lincoln would be a prime example of that because his views on the South not being able to secede from the Union were based on the Articles of Confederation. And the fact that this had language in it that would indicate that it was a perpetual union. You can see that up in the title of the document on the upper left that this was a perpetual union. It was never to be broken, and states did not have the right to secede from it. So um, it was signed by the notable people, listed there. And what that little inset there in the white text shows the 13 colonies, and they're in order of their approval and ratification of this document. And you can see it's a rather lengthy process. They technically approved it in November of 1777, and the states kind of gradually signed on to this all the way up till February of 1781. This encompasses a good portion of the Revolutionary War period. It might have had a lot to do with the time frame that it took to do this, and I don't have the exact facts on why this took such a long time to reach official status, but it did. And my guess would be that the country was so involved in the Revolutionary War effort that to pull the delegates together in a ratification process for this just wasn't top on the list. Okay. And here you see the language in there about the perpetual union between the states. And it's interesting that the final lines of this is it pleased the great governor of the world to incline the hearts of the legislators we respectively represent in Congress to approve of and to authorize us to ratify the said Articles of Confederation. That's how it ends. And look who they're appealing to, the great governor of the world. And I'm often amused a little bit at the number of different terms that they use for Almighty God and the God of the Bible, and there was quite a few of them. It was very common for them to use this kind of language back then, and nobody doubted who they were referring to. This is the God of the Bible. This is Almighty God, and in Jesus Christ, which a number of them uh, allude to as well, betraying that this is who they are talking about. Now, I think it'd be a good thing for us to take a look at because of the fact that this Articles of Confederation, and we're not going to take the time to read through that document to find out everything it did, but the thing that I think is important at this time is to step back and take a look at is what did the colonies look like from a religious perspective at that time? And if we're trying to answer the question, was America founded by Christians? And was America founded as a Christian country? Then it would be good to step back and take a look at the state constitutions because this Articles of Confederation was essentially a loosely knit federal structure with most of the power retained in the individual state, colonies. So let's take a look at that. At that time, the country population was about 3 million people. 98% of the population were Protestant Christians. Only 1%, about 30,000 people were Roman Catholic. And those Catholics were restricted to Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New York only. 9 of the 13 state constitutions required office holders to be a Protestant, which is, rather shocking, by today's standards, but wasn't shocking in their day. That was something they esteemed highly desirable. And this is how the Protestant portion of that breaks down. There are about 21% Congregationalists, about 18% Presbyterians. Baptists were about 15% of the population. Episcopalians, Anglicans were about 15. And then this last group, Dutch Reformed, German and Lutherans and Quakers and others, they were, roughly the last 30%. If you add it up, it's about a 30%, I would guess. And then another group there that's listed. It's the enslaved Africans who made up roughly 20 to 40% of the population, depending on the southern colony you're looking at. And the Native Americans largely practiced distinct traditional or what they call syncretic spiritual paths that were unrecorded in official European style church censuses. if you look at, what history calls the Negro spirituals, um, I think you will find that the African American enslaved individuals were highly religious. They were very devout, and they certainly had their own uh, religious culture along with that. Now, if we graph all that on a map, this is what it looks like, and so you have an idea of what the colonies essentially looked like at that time. You have this reddish line towards the left. That's the boundary of the 13 colonies. And then you see the color coding there for the individual Anglican, Congregational, Lutheran, Presbyterian. And this is a pretty busy map. You can see how the Baptists and Roman Catholics they're not color coded. They're like pepper shotgun, pepper sprayed in there because they're spread out quite a distance. But this that you're looking at right here is the official breakdown of the religious structure of the 13 colonies about 1750. We're coming into the French and Indian War at that time, and then coming out of that shortly, we're going to the Revolutionary period. So let's have a look at each of these state constitutions, and we'll do it in order of the ratification of the Articles of Confederation. So the first state to ratify it was in 1777. And here's some of the language. Now, we don't read the whole thing, but we've extracted some parts in here that deal with the religious statements. And and they say in this that religion or the duty of which we owe our Creator and the manner of discharging it can be directed only by reason and conviction, not by force or violence. Now that's a departure from history right there. Most religions were imposed by force, with force. The Church of England was a prime example of that, which of course would be the Anglican Church. If we go back to that map, you can see what a significant portion of the color coding was the Anglican Church. Now, as we come up to the point where we're separating from the British colonies, that in itself gets to be a sticky situation. And they don't want the Anglican English Church now governing over here. Therefore, all men are equally entitled to the free exercise of religion, according to the dictates of conscience, and that it is the mutual duty of all to practice Christian forbearance, love, and charity towards each other. Now, that is literally a summary of biblical doctrine down there on the bottom. And we could get chapter and verse where we call that out, right? And then, but it's that the religion is the duty we owe our Creator. So, this was a founding document for this colony here. Now, South Carolina was the second state to ratify the Articles. And then the language they have in there, that we, the people of South Carolina, are grateful to God for our liberties. Well, this is highly interesting because here we are at this early stage, and they are acknowledging that our liberties come from God. They do not come from the state or from any government, that they come straight from God. South Carolina got it right, and they got it right here at the beginning of their state constitution. Well, of course, these colonies, when they consolidated all these sentiments, some of these weaved their way into the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. No person shall be eligible to sit in the House of Representatives unless he be of the Protestant religion. That is a requirement, a religious requirement to serve in government in South Carolina. 9 of these colonies had such requirements. All persons in religious societies who acknowledge that there is one God and a future state of rewards and punishments, and that God is publicly to be worshipped, shall be freely tolerated. The Christian Protestant religion shall be deemed the established religion of the state. Now, this is something that the federal Constitution would shy away from. In fact, this is where they did not want a clause like this in there. They don't want a national religion. Now, the states were free to do this. Those things not deemed established by by the federal government were left to the states. So the states could leave these criteria in place. I think you'll find that South Carolina had this in force for quite some time after the federal Constitution was ratified. Okay, every society of Christians shall have agreed to the following five articles: that there is one eternal God, that God is publicly to be worshipped, that the Christian religion is the true religion, the Holy Scriptures of the Old and New Testament are of divine inspiration, and that it is lawful and the duty of every man being thereunto called by these govern to bear witness to the truth. Now, you know what that number five, this is interesting, is what this is saying is if you're going to govern in this state, you have to bear witness to the truth. You can't be an unprincipled person or a liar or somebody that operates underhandedly. This is requiring somebody that governs in the state to do so morally. No person shall officiate as a minister until the minister shall have subscribed to the following declaration: that he is determined by God's grace out of the Holy Scriptures to instruct the people committed to his charge and teach nothing required of necessity to eternal salvation, but that which he shall be persuaded may be concluded and proven from Scripture. So they're going to hold the preachers accountable to the Bible here. Now let's take a look at New York State Constitution. They were the third ones to ratify the Articles of Confederation. And here it refers to, well, they had to take some sort of an oath. And it says, whereas the delegates of the United States solemnly declare in the words following, the laws of nature and nature's God entitled them, all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, here's one that would go in. There's more than one state constitution have this language in it. Appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. This convention does further declare that the free exercise and enjoyment of a religious profession and worship without discrimination or preference shall forever hereafter be allowed within this state to all mankind. This is guaranteeing the religious exercise, free exercise of religion. And they're appealing here for the protection of divine providence. We'll see in a little bit why this is a repeated thing with our founding fathers, of this appeal to providence of God. And because they're about to live through a period of time where that was manifested in so many different ways that they all acknowledge it. And we'll talk about some of those quotes down the road here. Rhode Island was the fourth state to ratify the articles. Godly edifying themselves and one another in the holy Christian faith and worship, together with gaining over and conversion of our poor, ignorant Indian natives. Now, this is interesting. Now, here is Rhode Island writing into their state constitution a concern for that they need to present the Christian gospel to the indigenous Native Americans. They were concerned about them. They cared about them. In those parts of America, sincere profession and obedience of the same faith and worship by the good providence of God. Here we have it again. And it says, let's see here, and that true piety, rightly grounded upon gospel principles. What were they basing their compass on? What was their moral compass, directed by? The principles of the gospel. To secure them in free exercise and enjoyment of their civil and religious rights, appertaining to them as our loving subjects, and to preserve unto them that liberty in the true Christian faith and worship of God. And because some of the people inhabitants of the same colony cannot, in their private opinions, conform to the ceremonies of the Church of England, our royal will and pleasure is that no person within the said colony shall be anywise molested, punished, disquieted, or called into question for any differences in opinion in matters of religion. Well, as you saw in the colonies, there was quite a mix. There were all Christian persuasion, but there was quite differences of opinion of how the Christian faith should be expressed. And this was, I could tell you some colorful stories about, how this, this, came to bloodshed sometimes. The type of, white knuckle grip that people would have to their religious beliefs. It really, I'll interject this here, it really wasn't until the Revolutionary War when we faced a common enemy where all of these individual religious views decided they better band together and they started to tolerate each other on a higher level. Okay. Yeah. That they may be in better capacity to defend themselves in their just rights and liberties against the all enemies of the Christian faith. Now, this is kind of that sentiment that, look, we have enemies out there to our Christian faith, and we have to be united. That doesn't mean that they're going to have some document that's going to, require everybody to have the same religious beliefs, but the core doctrines and beliefs, they have to agree on. By their good life and orderly conversation, they may win and invite the native Indians of the country to the knowledge and obedience of the only true God and Savior of mankind. This is Rhode Island in 1778. In fact, the charter goes back to 1663, where and can you read this? Can you look at this and say that this was not written by a Christian people?
No.
They're governed by gospel principles. They're grounded on gospel principles. They're relying on the providence of God, and they're guarding against the enemies of the Christian faith. And then they're restating that there is only one true God and the Savior of mankind. And yeah, it's kind of hard to. This looks more like a church document than the state constitution, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. So Connecticut was the fifth state to ratify. At that time, they were continuing also to use their 1662 charter, which stated, "Our said people, inhabitants there, may be so religiously peaceable and civilly governed as their good life and orderly conversation may win, and invite the natives of the country." Yeah, do you see this? How many of these colonies had wrote right into their constitutions a consideration of the natives in their area? And how this goes against the modern narrative that we were the suppressors and enslavers and robber
Op-
barons. Yeah,
Oppressors, oppressed.
the oppressors of the native Israel, they didn't have. Now, were there pockets of those things? I'm sure there were, but as a whole, I mean, the majority of the population would sign on to the state constitution. The entire state population would sign on to this constitution, and they're expressing a concern for the indigenous natives of the country. So, don't believe what you're hearing when it comes to the abuse of the Native American Indians. There certainly was that kind of abuse. It was not sanctioned, and it was something that, well, it actually, if you can point to the King Philip's War, which well, I guess, see here, that would come in the 1750s. So they've already gone through it at this point. The Prince Philip Wars, his King Philip's Wars, was really the departure point from the Pilgrim era when they enjoyed such a wonderful relationship between the settlers and the Native American Indians. And it was one of the most wonderful, beautiful relationships. Truly brotherly love existed between the two groups at that time. Without the Native American Wampanoag Indians, Squanto, Samoset, we never would have been able to settle on these shores. The Pilgrims would have died in their entirety the first year. And the second year, they were, really, they were unequipped to survive. Without the Indians, they couldn't have done it. And they didn't forget it. They acknowledged that, and they became very dear friends of the Native American Indians they owed their lives to. So we see here again the Savior of mankind, the only true God, the Christian faith. This is a state constitution. Georgia, sixth state to ratify. Here they have another religious requirement. Representatives shall be chosen out of the residents in each uh, country rather, and they shall be of the Protestant religion. Every person entitled to vote shall take the following oath. I do voluntarily, solemnly swear or affirm, as the case may be, that I do owe true allegiance to this state and will support the Constitution thereof, so help me God. Well, we can see where our oath swearing came from, because already Georgia already had it at the time. New Hampshire was the seventh state. I'll read what it says here. As morality and piety rightly grounded on evangelical principles, there's the anchor again. There's the anchor that their principles stem from. And then notice in 1968, right in the middle of I would call the liberal period, as the liberals began to take over in the public square in this country, they changed that evangelical principles, they changed that to high principles. I often wonder what kind of high were they referring to in 1968.
Oh,
Will give the best and greatest security to government. The people of this state empower the legislature to make adequate provision for the son. Now, don't miss this. To make adequate provision for the support and maintenance of public Protestant teachers of piety, religion, and morality. They're not only to tolerate the teaching of the gospel, they are to fund it. This is government funding of religion in the state of New Hampshire. Every
how far,
denomination of
how far,
Christians.
how far we have slipped.
I'm sorry, Pastor Dave.
How far have we slipped? We have
Oh
slipped a
boy,
lot.
goodness. Yeah, what a mirror to look back and see our reflection back then and compared to what it is and what we see today. No person shall be capable of being elected a senator who is not of the Protestant religion. Every member of the House of Representatives shall be of the Protestant religion. The president governor shall be chosen annually, and no person shall be eligible to this office unless he shall be of the Protestant religion. Well, they could have just shortened that a few lines if they would have said you have to be a Protestant to serve in any office. It's essentially what they're saying. Pennsylvania's state constitution, sorry, it was the state constitution, but they were the eighth to ratify the articles. And at that time, in 1776, their constitution read, government ought to enable the individuals to enjoy their natural rights and the other blessings which the author of existence has bestowed upon men. Again, here's our rights, our natural rights coming from the author of existence. That is not a government agency. That is not a government body. That is the God of heaven. That all men have a natural and unalienable right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own conscience. Nor can any man who acknowledges the being of God be justly deprived or abridged of any civil right. Each member, before he takes his seat, shall make the following declaration. Can you just see the entire Congress of the state or the Senate of the state standing up and reciting these words? I do believe in one God, the creator and governor of the universe, the rewarder of the good and the punisher of the wicked. And I do acknowledge the scriptures of the Old and New Testament to be given by divine inspiration.
I would pay money to have our current lawmakers say
Yeah, I'd like to know in each of these colonies when they stopped, because I think you'd be surprised how far forward this carried. The laws for the encouragement of virtue and prevention of vice and immorality shall be made and constantly kept in force. All religious societies shall be encouraged. That's the state encouraging religious societies, supporting them. Here's Massachusetts, the ninth state to ratify the articles. We therefore, the people of Massachusetts, acknowledging with grateful hearts the goodness of the great legislator of the universe, in affording us, in the course of his providence, an opportunity of forming a new constitution of civil government. It is the right as well as the duty of all men in society, publicly and at stated seasons, to worship the Supreme Being, the great creator and preserver of the universe. Civil government essentially depend on the piety, religion, and morality. And as these cannot be generally diffused through a community, but by the institution of the public worship of God. Uh, there's a quote coming up of the founding fathers of somebody who acknowledges that our Constitution, meaning our federal Constitution, is wholly inadequate for anybody but a moral and religious people. It is insufficient for the governing of anybody else. And I'm paraphrasing there, but you'll get the real quote in a minute. But here is that exact same sentiment in Massachusetts state constitution. The people of this Commonwealth authorize the public worship of God and for the support and maintenance of public Protestant teachers of piety, religion, and morality. So recognizing in the above sentence that the civil government depends on those three attributes, the next sentence says we're going to support and maintain it. In other words, we're going to fund those things. You've got public financial support of religion of teachers of piety, Protestant teachers here. The governor shall be chosen annually. No person shall be eligible to this office unless he shall declare himself to be of the Christian religion. You can see some things opening up here. They're opening up the scope of from Protestant to Christian here. They're, because the Catholics, would play a role, a very, very minor role in the Constitutional Convention, but they only had one Catholic, was Carroll, and but he played a major, major role, and his religious beliefs weren't that different from the Protestants. And they looked at that and they said, well, he should be included, So there you can see that they're opening up. There's a very excellent video out there. It's called Backfired. And Pastor Dave, I sent that list of links. I know it's a lot of links, but if those
Yeah,
can be posted.
we're gonna post all of those links on our websites, classroomUSA.net, streetlevelamerica.com, and usaheartbeat.com. We're in the process of rebuilding all of our websites right now to put more content out there, and we'll put the links on those websites.
Excellent. I appreciate you doing that. And what that is a list of links that I had bookmarked and all of the videos there I have downloaded in my library of kind of the best of the videos that I've found out there, and primarily from two individuals. One of those is William Federer, Bill Federer. I regard him and one other gentleman, David Barton from Wall Builders. These are the two, I believe, the two greatest teachers of our original Christian history that we've ever had. And I encourage you to, anything you can find from any of those two guys is well worth having in your library and listening to, watching. But so to kind of shorten the process for you, I did a little bit of homework for you and put a list of links together to get you quickly to those places. And one of those that I would encourage you to start with is called Backfired. And he has, that's from William Federer, by the way. And he has a subtitle on it. It was called A Nation Founded on Religious Tolerance No Longer Tolerates Religion. It's the subtitle of that video. And he does a great job of not only defining the Christian roots, but also the slide, how far we've slid. Now back to Massachusetts state constitution. They had an oath to swear that I do declare that I believe the Christian religion, I believe the Christian religion and have a firm persuasion of its truth. Uh, North Carolina was the 10th state to ratify the articles. And their constitution says that all men have a natural and unalienable right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own conscience. That no person who shall deny the being of God or the truth of the Protestant religion or the divine authority, either of the Old or New Testaments, who shall hold religious principles incompatible with the freedom and safety of the state shall be capable of holding any office. So that's an inverted statement of the same that you find in the other one. So anybody who doesn't agree to these things is ineligible. That there should be no establishment of any one religious church or denomination. New Jersey would be the 11th state to ratify the articles, and that their state constitution said at that time that no person shall ever be deprived of the inestimable privilege of worshiping Almighty God in a manner agreeable to the dictates of his own conscience. No Protestant inhabitant of this colony shall be denied the enjoyment of any civil right. All persons professing a belief in the faith of any Protestant sect who shall demean themselves peacefully under the government shall be capable of being elected into any office. Delaware was the 12th. I do profess faith. This is every member had to recite this before taking their seat. And that would be in their Congress and their Senate, and probably even the governor's office. I do profess faith in God the Father, in Jesus Christ, his only Son, and in the Holy Ghost, one God, blessed forevermore. And I do acknowledge the Holy Scriptures of the Old and New Testament to be given by divine inspiration. That's amazing. That is everybody that served in Delaware in any political office at this time, and then to whichever time this was abolished. It may still be enforced for all I know, but they have had to recite this before they could take their seat. And this is a wonderful professional faith. I mean, this is something that you would it's more like a prayer, you know, than something of a state constitution. Maryland was the 13th and final state to ratify the articles. Actually, I think there's a 14 that was a non-colony that would come in and adopt it. But Maryland was the 13th of the colonies. At that time, Maryland's constitution stated that it is the duty of every man to worship God in such manner as he thinks most acceptable to him. All persons professing the Christian religion are equally entitled to protection in their religious liberty. The legislature may, in their discretion, lay a general and equal tax for the support of the Christian religion. How about this? Here's a tax that they're allowing to be levied for the support of Christian religion,
Oh,
leaving to each individual the power of appointing the payment to the support of his own denomination. And they also had an oath that they had to swear that and anybody appointed to their offices, I do swear that I do not hold myself bound in allegiance to the King of Great Britain. Well, that's interesting. They're the only colony to slip that in there. But I'm surprised they were the only one. And that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland, and shall also subscribe a declaration of his belief in the Christian religion. And here was the 14th, I believe, Vermont. It was actually its own independent republic at that time in 1777. Even though it did not participate in the Articles of Confederation, their constitution in 1771, uh, which was in effect at the time George Washington approved Vermont as the 14th state, said this: whereas all government ought to enable the individuals to enjoy their natural rights and the other blessings which the author of existence has bestowed upon men, that all men have a natural and unalienable right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own consciences and understanding, regulated by the Word of God. Here we go. Here we have the anchor, the moral compass that they're governed by, stated right here. Nevertheless, every sect or denomination of people ought to observe the Sabbath or the Lord's Day and keep up in support some sort of religious worship. which to them shall seem most agreeable to the revealed will of God. So there's a religious mandate there, but there's also freedom to interpret the scriptures, which is toleration, is tolerance. And each member, before he takes his seat in Vermont, shall say the following declaration: I do believe in one God, the creator and governor of the universe, the rewarder of good and punisher of the wicked, and I do acknowledge the scriptures of the Old and New Testament to be given of divine inspiration, and own and profess the Protestant religion. Well, as we look at that, and we look at all of the 13 colonies and their state constitution, it is undeniable that we are looking and examining the documents of a wholly religious and Christian people. These were the views that were held by the people of the state. We have an entirely Christian nation at this point. So we'll springboard into the U.S. Constitution now that we're talked about the Articles of Confederation, what the colonies were like, the religious makeup, which had a lot to do with the political views and the political makeup of those colonies. Because the men that would come to these ratification conventions for the Declaration and for the U.S. Constitution held those beliefs. They held those beliefs that we just read in those state constitutions. And they were there to represent those beliefs in the National Assembly. We're not going to go too deep into the Constitution process here. Um, I'm missing the top part of this, Pastor Dave, but I'm just going to read the yellow highlighted part.
Sure, go ahead.
It gives some of the dates and times. I wanted to get the details in here of the dates that the convention met. And in any event, this is the Second Continental Congress getting, back together, and they're getting together again, Independence Hall, in 1787. Now, we've just gone through the Revolutionary War under the Articles of Confederation. Of course, we had the Second Continental Congress was our governing body, and they were chased. They were chased. I don't know if you've ever looked at the number of, capitals, so to speak, that we've had, at that time. I know that they were chased to Harrisburg, they were chased to Princeton, they were chased, all these different locations during the Revolutionary War. And they were very much in danger, very much it wasn't a certainty at that point in time whether or not the British would prevail. And everyone that was part of the process here that we're discussing would be convicted of high treason and executed. So there was fear of that. There was concern. We at that time our colonies were made up of a lot of loyalists, probably a lot more loyalists than there were patriots to the American cause. And for that matter, they had to be very stealthy about how they went. So they never knew if the person next to them was a loyalist to the crown. Well, the drafting of the Constitution by many of the nation's founding fathers, often referred to as the framing, was completed at the Constitutional Convention, which assembled at Independence Hall between May 25th and September 17th, 1787. And of course, they're citing English common law here, the enlightened liberalism of philosophers like John Locke and Montesquieu. And it talks about the structure of the articles and that kind of thing. We're not going to take the time to go through that because that's general knowledge. Anybody can easily look up. But the very bottom of this says the Constitution of the United States is the oldest and longest standing written and codified national constitution in force in the world. The first permanent constitution, it has been interpreted, supplemented, and implemented by a large body of federal constitutional law and has influenced the constitutions of other nations. Extremely important and incredible document that these framers have left us. Now, there's some history here again. It continues. There's some history here on the drafting of this document. Um, but it would the part that I want to point to is the actual draft copy. So we looked at that with the Declaration draft copy. Let's take a look at the original Constitution copy. It was handwritten on 5 pages of parchment by another, I call him a scribe. They have another word for it, secretary, Jacob Shallis. So when we look at the Constitution of the United States, we're actually looking at his handwriting. The final document was taken up on Monday, September 17th, at the convention's final session. Several of the delegates were disappointed in the result. It goes on to say some of the sentiments. I love what Benjamin Franklin said. He summed it up like this, addressing the convention. He said, "There are several parts of this Constitution which I do not at all, that I do not at present approve, but I am not sure I shall never approve them. He would accept the Constitution because I expect no better, and because I am not sure that it is not the best." Now, there's a man with an open mind. Benjamin Franklin, wonderful comments that he had on it. So this is actually the documents. These are high resolution scans from the Library of Congress. This is the first page of Jacob Shallis's officially what they call engrossed copy of the Constitution. This is the one that was signed in Philadelphia by the delegates of the Constitutional Convention in 1787. That's sheet one. That's page one. This is page two. Now you start to see the articles. And you start to see Article 3, Article 4. This is page 3. And you have Article 5, 6, and 7. And the signing block. Okay, there's all the signatures down there broken up by state. You have George Washington right here. So that is our national constitution. That is the Constitution of the United States. So what did our founding fathers say about the Constitutional Convention? You'd be surprised how many of them had some interesting comments about it. I will say this, I'm going to present the good, but uh, I have a document in my files that the founding fathers of the comments that they made either at or shortly thereafter the Constitutional Convention. And they are full of doubt and unbelief whether they accomplished anything good or, they weren't this glowing testimony to the outcome. But then as time progressed and they stood back from the proceedings and they looked at what they had created, they were astounded. They were astounded. They realized that what had occurred was greater than the sum total of everybody present there at that convention. George Washington, and I don't know if you know about the relationship between the Marquis de Lafayette and George Washington. We don't have time to really go into it in this presentation, but uh, the Marquis de Lafayette was a vital part of the Revolutionary War effort. He was over here to learn and take the principles of freedom back to France, which did not work out for him. In fact, he got thrown in prison the minute he got back there. But George Washington, they had another idea. It was called the French Revolution. Okay, and they ended up with something totally different. But George Washington, Marquis de Lafayette was like an adopted son to him. There was a great age difference between the two. And something I encourage you might sometime want to download. I believe it was 1846. Marquis de Lafayette was the last living general of the Revolutionary War. And because of his relationship with George Washington, when he came back here to tour the eastern seaboard of the United States, and he was received like a king. He was received like a king, not only because he was the last living general of the Revolutionary War, but his intimate relationship with a man who was a legend in the mind of the country before he died, George Washington. So we have correspondence between George Washington and Marquis de Lafayette about this constitutional convention. And George says to him, "It appears to me little short of a miracle that the delegates from so many different states, which states are so different, also different from each other in their manners, circumstances, and prejudices, should unite in forming a system of national government so little liable to well-founded objections." Washington is pointing out here, they really don't have any idea how all of these minds can come together with one, in one opinion. He later writes to Lafayette a couple months later. Now, he wrote that previous one before the process had finished. He's writing this in the process of just a few short weeks. It's going to be determined. The plot thickens fast. A few short weeks will determine the political fate of America for the present generation and probably produce no small influence on the happiness of society through a long succession of ages to come. Should everything proceed with harmony and consent, according to our actual wishes and expectations, I will confess to you sincerely, my dear Marquis, it will be so much beyond anything we had a right to imagine or expect 18 months ago that it will demonstrate as visibly the finger of Providence as any possible event in the course of human affairs can ever designate it.
Wow.
Oh, you stand and pull that statement apart. The language is different than the way we speak today,
Oh,
but so
yes.
powerful. It's so powerful the way Washington wrote that, that he's saying, if this plays out and we're successful, you are watching the finger of divine providence at work. Dr. Benjamin Rush, when I'm giving tours, not every time do I get into Christ Church Burial Ground, where now several of the signers are in there in Philadelphia. One of those is Dr. Benjamin Rush, and he is such a pivotal role in the foundations of this country. Definitely somebody that is worth studying in history. And this is what Dr. Rush had to say about the convention. He proceeded to consider the origin of the proposed Constitution and fairly deduced it was from heaven, asserting that he as much believed the hand of God was employed in this work as that God had divided the Red Sea to give up a passage to the children of Israel or had fulminated the Ten Commandments from Mount Sinai.
Wow.
He's linking the success of this document and the coming together of the states and the colonies' minds to a single purpose was on a level that could only have been inspired from heaven and was on the level of the dividing of the Red Sea and the Ten Commandments from Mount Sinai. Uh, just exactly how esteemed did they hold our Constitution? And this is a rather incredible statement. And this is right after its ratification that he said this. Those sentiments would only strengthen as time would go on. James Madison, who a lot of people regard as the author of the Constitution, he wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration, and he said this: the great objects which presented themselves to the Constitutional Convention formed a task more difficult than can be well conceived by those who were not concerned in the execution of it. Adding to these considerations the natural diversity of human opinions on all new and complicated subjects, it is impossible to consider the degree of concord which ultimately prevailed as less than a miracle. And we have all these founding fathers with the same sentiments stating it in different, verbiage. And finally, here's Charles Pinckney. He's a South Carolina delegate, was a signer of the Constitution. He said this: When the General Convention met, no citizen of the United States could expect less from it than I did. There's an optimistic beginning, huh? So many jarring interests and prejudices to reconcile. The variety of pressing dangers at our doors, meaning the Revolutionary War, even during the war, were barely sufficient to force us to act in concert and necessarily give way at times to each other. But when the great work was done and published, I was not only most agreeably disappointed, what a way to say that. He was disappointed that it failed because he had thought so. But he was agreeably disappointed because he was glad it succeeded. Well, we don't necessarily write like that today, but you pull that apart, you can see it's not at all that he was disappointed in the document, but struck with amazement. He was struck with amazement. Nothing less than that superintending hand of providence that so miraculously carried us through the war could have brought it about. So here's another participant that saw the hand of providence at work in the success of this document. He saw no way that they were coming, particularly the way the Constitutional Convention started. Nothing but bickering and infighting and arguments. Everybody arguing with their own political interests for their 13 colonies. Absolutely no central consensus was taking place until Benjamin Franklin stood up and had a call for prayer. And I believe I have that quote in here coming up, so I won't try to paraphrase it right now. We'll read it when we get to it. But that, my friends, was the defining moment. That was the event that changed the entire nature of the Constitutional Convention when they implored the God of heaven to participate in the proceedings. Before we go on to some of those quotes from those founders, and that's really the point of this second half, is to get to the quotes. What did they say? But let's take a look at, let's do a little history here and take a look at Philadelphia. Now, you go there today. This is an aerial view, satellite view of a lot of these locations of what we're talking about. And we'll start off here by Independence Mall. I don't know if you can see my cursor wiggling around down here, but this is Independence Hall right here. Here you have the signing room is in this corner down here on the ground floor. And then you have this is Congress Hall over here. They call it Congress Hall, but the Senate met upstairs, of course. George Washington was inaugurated for his second term in here. John Adams was inaugurated for his first. And uh, and really, the first exchange, peaceful exchange of power of a nation, took place right where my cursor is. In the Congress Hall on the ground floor, there's a door that comes out right here into this courtyard. And I apologize, I didn't put a picture inside that hall, but the stretch of carpet from the secretary's desk and the rostrum in there to that door on this side of Congress Hall was the walk that George Washington and John Adams took after Washington relinquished his presidency to John Adams. John Adams had such immense respect for Washington that he absolutely refused to go out that door ahead of Washington. And Washington argued with him and said, "No, you are the president, and you need to go greet the people of this country out through that door." I heard an estimate. I don't recall if I'm getting this right, but in this courtyard back here were 10,000 people waiting for Adams and Washington to come out of that door. So tremendous history here, folks. Take a trip to Philly sometime and go on Park Service tour. They'll take you in here into these rooms. The Congress being on the ground floor is called the lower house, and the Senate on the upper floor is called the upper house. We still use those terms today. If you've ever wondered where that comes from, it's that building right there. It's the Supreme Court wing is right here under my mouse. Across the street over here is the new Liberty Bell Pavilion, and the Liberty Bell is sitting about under the tip of my cursor right there. And if you walk down this street right here, it's behind glass. You can see it any time of day. And at night it's lit up and it's just absolutely gorgeous to look into the golden kind of glow of the lights that they have on the Liberty Bell. That's well worth the trip to see that. And here was Carpenter's Hall down here. Remember I said if you're looking at the front of Independence Hall, that would be looking this way. You turn to your left and you walk down Chestnut Street, three structures. This is the second bank of uh, National Bank, and this is the one that Andrew Jackson killed, by the way. And then here is a kind of a long courtyard, called a courtway, or a passageway between two structures. One of them's under trees here to lead up to the front door of Congress Hall. Now, I described that for the audience last week, but this is Carpenter's Hall rather, and just so you got a layout of where to find that. City's Tavern's on the map here. That is where the Continental Congress and possibly even the first Continental Congress sometimes would adjourn for meals. And right here is another site down here. It's just an open courtyard right now. This is the site of William Penn's slate roof house, they call it. And there's a marker there for William Penn. Of course, he was the founder of Pennsylvania. Now, if we come up to the top here, there's two sites that I'll point out last year for you. The first is this one, and I'll draw a little bit of a rectangle around it right here. That area right there. That's called Franklin Court, and this is, of course, a modern map. This is what you'll see today. I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you some pictures of this, of the excavations that took place in 1953, and some history about Franklin Court here. That's the first site we'll visit. The second site we'll visit is over here, this one right here. Now, this is the old Liberty Bell Pavilion, and for years and years, my family we used to vacation here on the 4th of July, many years. And so that was usually when we'd find ourselves here in the city. But if you drove down any of these streets, you would have this is a green bulletproof glass enclosure originally, and you could drive by and see the Liberty Bell anytime. Just drive down that street, and you would see the Liberty Bell inside this. Okay, it's just really wonderful to just it's just a commonplace thing. It's like an old friend, anybody in the neighborhood just so used to seeing it. Not quite as accessible now, but viewable from Chestnut Street here. But this, at the time we were visiting here during those years, they had not excavated this yet, but they knew that the house that George Washington stayed at during the Constitutional Convention sat underneath this Liberty Bell Pavilion. I don't know if that had something to do with why they put the pavilion there on top of it, but for whatever, they decided that it was time to excavate that. So they moved the Liberty Bell, built this new pavilion, and it freed up this area that they could take this apart and dig down. I'm going to show you pictures of all that here. So let's first stop off at Franklin Court. Now, I made the comment in part one that we didn't really have much respect for our founding history. And this is a prime example of it because this is the site of Benjamin Franklin's house and print shop and his tenements, his tenant houses. And it was according to a Park Service historian that I talked to, was lost to history. You see this archway here in the lower left. This is just a wonderful relic to have still to this day. Here you see it on the right side. And the significance of that is that they had lost the location of Franklin's house. They built all these unsightly buildings and apartments and warehouses on top of it. It was demolished in 1812. And they just made no effort whatsoever to preserve any of that. As the city swallowed it up. Well, they knew it was on Chestnut Street, but they weren't quite sure if they could ever figure out where on Chestnut Street it had been. They knew it was on this block. That was about it. Then I can't quite read that. I've got a toolbar. I don't know if I can move that toolbar. Let me try. Yes, I moved it up. Yes, now I can read it. Oh, I got the toolbar to go away. The two houses next to the street. This is Benjamin Franklin's comments in a letter he wrote to his sister Jane. The two houses next to the street are 3 stories high, besides the garrets, and an arched passage is in the middle, is left in the middle between them to come through down to my dwelling, wide enough for a carriage so that I have the old passage lot left free to build another house. The two houses are 24 feet from each other. I'm sorry, 24 feet front each. That's the frontage. And 45 feet deep. We are all well and join in love to you and yours. Okay, so this comments that he wrote to mentioning that arch. And he wrote this in 1787. Hey, that's the year, May 30th of 1787, they were in the midst of the Constitutional Convention. So this archway was there, and they know that Franklin walked through this arch or took his carriage through this arch every day that he went to the Constitutional Convention. And it may have been there earlier than that, and he may have walked through it to go to some other events in the city. I mean, it's obviously a structure that remains to this day that we can link directly to Franklin. If he walked through that arch, he'd recognize the bricks on the wall. So how lovely is it for us to have that today? Now, the story that I was told by the Park Service historian, and I cannot find any accounts of it online, so I'm just telling you, that's where I heard this. And he was the one that gave me well, he actually brought these photographs out and let me take pictures of them. So the pictures that I'm showing you are pictures that he brought out for me to take while he was telling me that story. He said that somebody was renovating the front of this building on the left side here, and they pulled the facade off, the cladding off. And lo and behold, this arch was behind there. Well, they thought it was really a beautiful feature that, that they didn't associate it with Franklin at all. And it wasn't until a Park Service representative, and we're talking about the early 1900s here. Um, I can't tell you the year because I know he told me at the time, but I don't recall. I did get the impression it was, before 1920, probably might have been 1905, somewhere around in there. But I can't document this from someplace for certainty. But he said that the Park Service person had read Franklin's letters and he remembered this passageway. And he said, Franklin's house was in line with that arch. Now we know where it was. So now they went to the city and they said, we've got to fix this. The city had to buy up all those buildings back there. They had to demolish them. Oh, this is interesting. Now my clicker does not work. I may have to get out of this and come back in. Okay. Now I've reset it. I'm good. Um, and then they had to do the archaeological excavation. Now, no, it wasn't until 1953 they decided to do this. But now you can see they're digging down and they're uncovering the walls of Franklin's house, the privy pit, um, some of these other structures, and judging by where they're at right now, I would say they're closer to the print shop than his house. The house would probably be behind us. He also brought out for me the archaeological, blueprint, that they made about what they found. And it, gives some distances. It gives the location of different things that they've identified. And And it's interesting to study that. I've leave it up on the screen there for a little bit for you. You guys can wind the video back and maybe study that if it's clear enough for you. You probably might be able to find that online and clearer than these are from a photograph I took of what he brought out. Now, that part was, I believe, the print shop. This is more of Franklin's house. You can see the print shop to the left there, where it says Franklin's print shop. Then you have Franklin's tenants' houses. So, and I'm reverted here. This would be Chestnut Street would be Market Street rather would be all the way to the right. Franklin's house, I believe, would be to the left still. That means that this is Franklin's house. I had that flip, sorry. Now, if you look at that for a second, I'll talk to you a little bit when we see some structures here. Just kind of keep in mind the those yellow circles there. And this is what they did. Once they did the excavations on the left side, they covered it over. They erected a steel skeleton the size of his house and the size of his print shop directly over the foundations. So this is, the height. We know an incredible amount of these structures, of information on these structures, because Franklin, particularly the house, because Franklin was out of the country. I think he was in France at the time he was constructing this, and his wife Deborah was overseeing the construction of the house and describing everything to Franklin in letters back, to England or wherever he was, England or France. He may have been in England. Um, but the letters are extremely detailed, and they describe different rooms, every room in here, and oh, the curtains, I've selected this, and the fireplace mantle, this is what this looks like. Well, if you look at these little kind of segment structures that are sticking up out of the ground, those are viewing portals where they've left it open to the archaeological excavations underneath under glass. Now you go there to this day, these are still there and they're still open. Now this photo was taken relatively early, and I know that because they do not have the inset stones in the rooms in here that are now today engraved with comments from Deborah's and Franklin's letters of each of the rooms you're standing in. So if you go there today, it takes some time to go through this because there's a lot of inscriptions in the ground, in the stonework that right from Franklin and in his wife's letters describing each of the rooms of where you're standing. So it's a fascinating place to visit. And this is his print shop. This is the skeleton structure of his print shop. And of course, then we have his archway. So we're fortunate, very fortunate to have been able to relocate these things and preserve the memories of these things for posterity. There's quite a bit more I could say on that. His tenant houses are up here, and there's actually more original stuff that is there today that is to be seen in those houses. There's structures contemporary with Franklin that are still in there. And then in this, of course, is the infamous arch. And if you can just imagine Ben Franklin, walking straight at you on his way to the Constitutional Convention, and it's just kind of fun to imagine.
Yes, it is. One of the things I like about going deep into this history is, and we're hearing, and I'll be honest, we've been trying to get permission from, I think, Independence Hall or whatever, to interview the rangers and talk about these locations. Now, I'm not saying you're saying this. I'm saying this, and here's why I'm saying we're having a hard time getting access to this to do interviews, podcasts, and so on and so forth. Now, I don't know why that is. There's a big controversy right now with Smithsonian that is tending to be more activist in their depiction of history than just telling the facts. One of the reasons we like doing what we're doing now is we're just giving you the information. We're just giving you the facts, and that's part of why we started Classroom USA was to really get out factual information without uh, any kind of woke ideology.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear about the roadblocks, but I'm not surprised because I've run into the same. Um, if I take any groups through the yard, I keep them small, and I try not to draw too much attention, and I'm not going through there with a film crew or something like that.
Right. I understand.
That's when you're going to get some pushback. You got a film crew in there, somebody's going to come up and say something. I will say this: the Park Service, does offer tours of these areas, and I won't get into it now, but I've gone through periods of time where there was a clear liberal slant, and it was even working its way into the Park Service narratives. And I imagine that has been undone in recent years with Trump and the Trump administration. I have graphic examples of that being undone in a certain case, and I'll save that possibly for a subsequent uh, treatment.
Okay.
But here we're looking from the vantage point of his house, looking at his print shop facade and through the archway. Very beautiful courtyard. They've done a great job. The buildings are still rather unsightly on both sides of this, but they've erected these large concrete walls and on the right side of it. By the way, on the right side here, through these doors, is a Benjamin Franklin museum. And they have some interesting artifacts in there. I mean, I have photographs from in there, but not fresh in my memory. But his, what they call the accordion. It was a musical instrument. It was basically like, I don't know if you've ever run a wet finger around a glass, wine glass. He used that principle to create an instrument. And he turned that on its side and pedaled it with a pedal like a sewing machine. And then you could wet your fingers and make music with the glass that was going around. Harmonica, I think he called it. That's in there. He's got one of those. And Ben Franklin was very clever. He had a lot of interesting inventions. Some of them are in there. So don't miss that if you go. Um, you can access this courtyard through the arch. And also, if you're at Carpenter Hall, you can cross the street, walk down a little bit. They have a gate there, but during the day, that gate is usually open. If the gate's open, you can walk through and you're looking through it right here. That's an alleyway. And that would go out to Chestnut Street and Carpenter Hall will be just back in there. So you can get in here from that side. Franklin, he made, we're talking a little bit about Franklin now. I want to show you his gravesite because it's a place you don't want to miss visiting. Franklin said, I am now entering my 78th year. If I live to see this peace concluded, I shall beg leave to remind Congress of their promise, then to dismiss me. I shall be happy to sing with old Simeon. Now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, for my eyes have seen thy salvation. So it's just a comment he made about, he's going on in years and thinking about, he's going to pass away here. And that eventually, of course, did come. And Benjamin Franklin was buried right here. And I will have to back up on the map to show you where that is. I didn't point it out. I'm sorry. But that's actually one street up further from the arch, which is Market Street. You got to go up one more street and turn to the left. If you're at Franklin's Court there, you just continue to walk up one more block, take a left, and then you will walk by this open section. This is a wrought iron fence that's inset into about a 7 or 8 foot high brick wall that encompasses Christ Church's burial ground. And, you know, people all day long will reach it through the bars there and they'll throw pennies in on there. Pastor Dave, can you figure out why they throw pennies in there?
Uh, they do that with the military. There's a significance to it, and there's certain denominations of coins mean you saw the person die in action, you served with them in the unit, and a nickel means this, and a quarter means this, and so on and so forth. Um, you got me. Why the pennies on Franklin's tomb?
Well, that is absolutely correct what you just said. And you will find pennies and coins of all kinds on graves all over. But that's not the reason on Franklin's grave. There's another reason on his. He made
Uh,
a famous statement, a penny saved is a penny earned.
okay.
And that's why people to this day, it's just a thing, to want to show up at Franklin's grave and throw a penny on there. And it's just a way to honor him. I've got a lot of pictures of this. Pictures from the other side of the fence. I've been in there many times. I've stood right at this from the inside. But it's nice to see it from the outside because this is the vantage point. Passersby are going by this all day. And on the wall to my left here, on the brick, there's a plaque. And Franklin wrote his own epitaph that he wanted posted by his grave. And this
Of
is what
course he
it
would.
says. You can see his sense of humor. The body of Benjamin Franklin, printer, like the cover of an old book, its contents torn out and stripped of its lettering and gilding, lies here, food for worms. Yet the work itself shall not be lost, for it will, as he believed, appear once more in a new and more beautiful edition, corrected and amended by the author. And it's just tremendous. I mean, even in death, Franklin is still reaching out to us with his sense of humor here, uh, and which he was noted for. So I just want to point that out to you. So let's just take a trip over to the second location, the archaeological location here. And this, of course, is what they call the president's house. That's because Washington stayed here during the convention. Of course, the people that own the house, they are known identity, and it was their house. But he used it while he was here, and this is what it was thought to look like. It's a painting or engraving at the time, lithograph maybe. Uh, and this is the layout, the plan view of it, of what this looked like. Now, the main structure of the house up here that they're going to be excavating is here. This building is the brand new, this dark magenta color is the brand new Liberty Bell Pavilion. So you can see it's part of it is over the top of some of it, and the original Liberty Bell Pavilion was on top of a major portion of this in this region. That dark, I don't know, blue color right here. That's the 2007 excavations, and I was there for that. And I have some pictures of my own for that. Plus, I got some good ones off the internet. So here they're in 2007. They're digging down. They're finding the foundations of that house, and this is where Washington spent his time while he was here at the Constitutional Convention. I don't know if he used it during the First Continental Congress or anything like that. I'm not sure much is known about where he resided during that period, but we do know for sure he's here for this. You can see how extensive this excavation was. And in fact, the archaeologists are down there working right now, and they're screening out, scoops of dirt. Here's another crew. Now, what you see in the background there is a viewing platform that they erected here. And this site was turned into, and I don't want to get political on anybody here without doing a proper treatment of it, but this turned into be a bullet pulpit for slavery activists. And I would say up front that slavery will never be acceptable in the eyes of God. It will never be uh, anything but an abominable practice. But every nation on this earth has had slavery. And the Bible talks about slavery and has rules uh, for freeing slaves every 7 years, which Israel violated, by the way, and it cost them 70-year captivity in Babylon. At the time I was there, they hadn't gone this far with this excavation here, and this area was full of people, and they had groups of people for years that would stand here, and demonize the founding fathers of America. I mean, literally, never profanely, but implicating them as hypocrites and scoundrels and uh, just undesirables. That they were they had a chance to fix that problem and they didn't do it, and you can imagine the liberal slant that this had. And it goes way beyond that. It goes way beyond this ever happened. What would happen every 4th of July down here? These activists would show up every time, and their purpose was to destroy the 4th of July patriotic ceremonies and remembrances. They wanted to absolutely obstruct it and destroy it and turn it into something else. Well, I had some rather interesting encounters down here that
Hey,
we don't
Mike,
have time.
let me interrupt for just a moment. We've got a very severe thunderstorm overhead. We're inside the building, of course. Hopefully, we won't lose the internet or the lightning. We did lose the internet and the power here at this studio. We haven't had any problems yet, but I just want to give you a heads up in case you see a flicker
Okay,
or something going on. But it's a pretty severe storm. Um, um, uh, Unless I told you, hopefully you'll not even know it. But I wanted to give you a heads up in case we lose connection. Go ahead.
I appreciate it. If something happens and the feed drops, then what we'll do is we'll reset this for next week and we'll pick it up wherever that we dropped it. I don't know if I'll be able to get through this today. We may end up in the third session anyway. It depends on how
Yeah,
long you want to go for. The and we're really heading into the quotation section of this, and things go much quicker than. But I wanted to spend some time on these sites because this is history it's all covered over now. You can't see any of this now. So
okay.
I wanted to show the audience.
Let me tell you this. Continue to do this. I've got to go close the door, and I'm going to do that. Continue with your presentation. I'll be back in about a minute. So keep going.
Okay, very good, no problem. Well, anyway, without making too much of that in this broadcast, it was clearly an attempt of demonizing our founding fathers. And in fact, I've heard them referred to profanely on this site. And nothing could be further from the truth. Our founding fathers did not want slavery. They did not. And even our founding fathers that owned slaves, they were not happy with this practice. You realize that our country, like most of the countries of the world, their economies had a component to it that relied on the slave labor. But this characterization of our founders as slave beaters and inhumane, this kind of thing is a liberal revisionist slant that was put on this, and it was on full display here during this time. I can tell you that that is not going on here anymore, and that the Trump administration, even displays have been put up around here. The Trump administration has come in with historians, and they've revised them. They still address the issue, but they address it from the factual standpoint of a group of founders that was laboring to eliminate the practice of slavery and to emancipate their slaves. I hope to talk to Pastor Dave about this, actually do an entire presentation on that, which is going to take me some time to put together. So there'll be an announcement when we can get to that. And I hope nobody out there is offended by that, but it is part of our history. We need to go there. We need to visit it. We need to, look, you can always find abuses, even today. Today, we can still find abuses. Is there racism? Absolutely. Is there discrimination? Absolutely. Is it our national policy? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And those examples are minor, they're relatively few, and not representative of the whole, and not representative of what we want to be as a country. Here is a really good view showing Independence Hall. You kind of see where we are on this in relation to Independence Hall. And of course, you're looking here at the new Liberty Bell Pavilion. The first part of this is a long museum that tells the history of the Liberty Bell and gives a lot of that anti-slavery history in there, of course, as well. Obviously, they had latched on to the Liberty Bell as a beacon or a symbol of the freedom that they were longing for. I don't have any objections to that. That's part of our history and their history. And the Liberty Bell is means something to everyone. I included this slide because here you can see this portion. Now, I haven't really done a comparison, but to see if how much of this is intact from the original Liberty Bell Pavilion. But this is the bulletproof green glass that you used to see the Liberty Bell inside of. And now it houses an open pit of the excavations of the president's house that are being preserved that way. And they have put up a facade structure, much like Franklin Court, where you can see the chimneys, where the chimneys were located here, and some of the rooms in there are noted, and the windows and the front doorway. So it's someplace to visit when you go, where you can see where Washington stayed. I mean, this is where he went, and he only had to come out this door or a side door and walk across this courtyard here to the front of Independence Hall. He had a very, very short walk to get to the proceedings. So now, this portion, it might get a little lengthy. I hope I don't bore people or whatever, but the content of this that we're about to go into here is so critical to really answering the questions in front of us right now. Were we founded by a Christian people? I think we've already answered that, looking at state constitutions and the other things presented. I think we've answered that. Whether our country was founded as a Christian nation is still yet before us. So, in order to the best answer to that question, we have to really pay attention to what did our founders say? What did they say about the process? Now, these are be quotes. We've already looked at some quotes pertaining to the Constitutional Convention and the miraculous opinion they had of its success. But now these will be quotes that would go on to talk about the principles of Christianity in the government itself. So this is what John Adams said on the 4th of July in 1821. The highest glory of the American Revolution was this. It connected in one indissoluble bond the principles of civil government with the principles of Christianity. We could wrap it up and go home right here. Here you have one of the guys that was instrumental in the Declaration and certainly instrumental in the creation of the Constitution. That in looking back some almost 30 years is stating the what is obvious to everyone at that point in time that that the American Revolution connected in one indissoluble bond the principles of civil government with the principles of Christianity. Really, end of story right there. And listening to his viewpoint. Now, John Adams was the chairman of the American Bible Society. He considered it his highest and most important role, even above his participation in either of these conventions. The society, formed in part by Francis Scott Key, who is the author of the Star-Spangled Banner. They elected the former president of the Continental Congress, Elias Boudinot, as his first president in 1816, followed by John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Quincy Adams, the sixth president of the U.S., Rutherford B. Hayes, the 19th president, and U.S. President Benjamin Harrison. They all served as vice presidents of the American Bible Society. So much for keeping biblical Christianity out of the public square. Patrick Henry was an original member of the Continental Congress. He said, "It cannot be emphasized too strongly or too often that this great nation was founded not by religionists, but by Christians, not on religions, but on the gospel of Jesus Christ. For this very reason, people of other faiths have been afforded asylum, prosperity, and freedom of worship here. Again, almost case closed reading this. And by the way, these men said this when there were many eyewitnesses and a whole population that believed these sentiments. And I can find, and I would challenge anybody to find any sentiments to the contrary contradicting these men after they had made these statements. But it couldn't be been emphasized too strongly or too often enough that this great nation was founded not by religionists, but by Christians. Not on religions, but on the gospel of Jesus Christ. This quote right here answers the question in its entirety, whether we were founded by Christians and whether the country, the nation was founded as a Christian nation. It's answered right here in one quote, but we'll go on to more. John Adams wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson in 1813. He said, the general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the only principles in which that beautiful assembly of young gentlemen could unite. And these principles only could be intended by them in their address or by me in my answer. And what were these general principles? I answer, the general principles of Christianity, in which all those sects were united, and the general principles of English and American liberty, in which all those young men united, and which had united all parties in America in majorities sufficient to assert and maintain her independence. He's pointing back to the principles of Christianity that inhabited the colonies and the state constitutions and the beliefs of those 13 colonies. John Quincy Adams would later say, is it not that the Declaration of Independence first organized the social compact on the foundation of the Redeemer's mission upon earth, that it laid the cornerstone of human government upon the first precepts of Christianity? The cornerstone of human government upon the precepts of Christianity. Thomas Jefferson would say, the Bible is the cornerstone of liberty. A student's perusal of the sacred volume will make him a better citizen, a better father, and a better husband. Here's the author of the Declaration of Independence affirming that the Bible was the cornerstone of our liberty and that a study of it will make you a better citizen, a better father, and a better husband. Noah Webster, we're all familiar with him, the Webster's Dictionary, and of course there's several Websters. I don't know if Noah was the one that came out with the dictionary, but I think he was. The religion which has introduced civil liberty is the religion of Christ and his apostles, which enjoins humility, piety, and benevolence, which acknowledges in every person a brother or a sister and a citizen with equal rights. This is genuine Christianity, and to this we owe our free constitutions of government. It's inescapable, the linkage here between the Bible, Christianity, Jesus Christ, and our civil government.
Yes, it is.
Samuel Adams would say this, 1772, the right to freedom being the gift of Almighty God, or God Almighty. There again, that's coming right out of the Constitution, that our rights come from our Creator, not from our government. The right to freedom being the gift of Almighty God, the rights of the colonists as Christians may best be understood by reading and carefully studying the institutions of the great lawgiver and the head of the Christian church, which are to be found clearly written and promulgated in the New Testament. Samuel Adams would again say, and it is our duty to extend our wishes to the happiness of the great family of man. I conceive that we cannot better express ourselves than by humbly supplicating the supreme ruler of the world that the rod of tyrants may be broken to pieces, and the confusions that are and have been among nations may be overruled by promoting and speedily bringing on that holy and happy period when the kingdom of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ may be everywhere established, and all people everywhere willingly bow to the scepter of him who is the Prince of Peace. There was no separation in their minds between our civil government, our religious beliefs, and the Creator. George Mason, he mirrors a phrase that was found in the Declaration of Independence about the laws of nature and nature's God. And when he says, the law of nature are the laws of God, whose authority can be superseded by no power on earth. These are those inalienable attributes. James Wilson was a law professor at the University of Philadelphia, wrote the Lectures on Law in 1789 to 91. Law communicated to us by reason and conscience has been called natural, as promulgated by the Holy Scriptures. It has been called revealed. But it should always be remembered that this law, natural or revealed, flows from the same divine source. It is the law of God. Human law rather, must rest its authority and ultimately upon the authority of that law which is divine. Now, this is I think, a very necessary quotation today because
Yes.
we have some that would assert that when Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, he was not appealing to a divine creator. He was appealing to a natural uh, divinity. They were referring to almost like a what we would call today. Um, Help me with the word there, Pastor Dave. The people that,
Um,
the nature worshipers. Uh, what is the term that we put on
the
that?
universe. It's just that the universe, there's some kind of intrinsic thing like the Force in Star Wars, just that binds everything together and draws its energy from the force that is the universe. And
Yeah,
so you don't need a god, but there is just some kind. But they also say they're promulgating the view that there is something out there, but it's not God. There's just something
right.
else. We don't know what it is. We know what to
It's
call it.
it's an it's
It's just
an evolutionary process, whatever. Today they'll split it many different ways, but essentially
yeah,
the Bible calls it
God.
worshiping the creation more than the creator. Okay, putting
Correct.
the creation above the creator, and this is what James Wilson says. About that, how he makes it clear that when they're talking about natural law, they are referring to the law that comes from the divine source, the law of God.
Yeah.
Alexander Hamilton said the sacred rights of mankind are not to be rummaged for among old parchments or musty records. They are written as with a sunbeam by the hand of divinity itself and can never be erased or obscured by mortal power. Good and wise men in all ages have supposed that the deity, from the relations we stand in to himself and to each other, has constituted an eternal and immutable law which is indispensably obligatory upon all mankind. There we go, our inalienable rights. This is the sentiments where those statements come from. John Langdon was the signer of the U.S. Constitution. He wrote a proclamation in October of 1785. It therefore becomes our indispensable duty not only to acknowledge, in general, with the rest of mankind, our dependence on the supreme ruler of the universe, but as a people peculiarly favored, to testify our gratitude to the author of all our mercies in the most solemn and public manner. In this, I hear a veiled reference to the incidences of divine preservation, divine favor that many of our founding fathers referred to, and he calls us a people peculiarly favored. George Washington, in his farewell address, 1796, said, of all the dispensations and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness. These firmest props of the duties of men and citizens, the mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. So now he's pulling out religion and morality as the very supports of our political prosperity. That's our governmental structure. Our political prosperity is referring to our governmental structure,
Yeah.
which are founded on religion and they're held up by religion and morality. Washington sent a circular letter to the states on June 8th, 1783. I now make it my earnest prayer that God would most graciously be pleased to dispose us all to do justice, to love mercy, and to demean ourselves with that charity, humility, and pacific temper of mind, which were the characteristics of the divine author of our blessed religion. And without a humble imitation of whose example in these things, we can never hope to be a happy nation. Do you see the intimate intertwining of religious morality, the characteristics of biblical morality, and that come from the divine author with our civil government? Thomas Jefferson, July 6, 1775. Now take a look at that date, July 6, 1775. That's about 1 year before the Declaration of Independence. And I don't know if this is Jefferson did not participate in the First Continental Congress, which was 1774, but he was off writing some other documents like this one possibly, for taking up the causes and necessity of taking up arms, which is certainly contemporary with the Continental Congress's proceedings with the Declaration. He says here, but a reverence for our great Creator, principles of humility, and the dictates of common sense must convince all those who reflect upon the subject that government was instituted to promote the welfare of mankind and ought to be administered for the attainment of that end. Our cause is just. Our union is perfect. Our internal resources are great, and if necessary, foreign assistance is undoubtedly attainable. We gratefully acknowledge as signal instances of the divine favor towards us. Here, Jefferson, in 1775, is already acknowledging the instances of divine providence that were on display to the American cause. That his providence would not permit us to be called into this severe controversy until we were grown up to our present strength, had been previously exercised in warlike operation, and possessed of the means of defending ourselves. He's talking about the timing of things here, timing events, that God allowed these events to unfold at a time when they were ready to undertake this. With hearts fortified with these animating reflections, we most solemnly, before God and the world, declare that exerting the utmost energy of those powers which our beneficent Creator had graciously bestowed upon us, the arms we have been compelled by our enemies to assume, we will, in defiance of every hazard, with unabating firmness and perseverance employ, for the preservation of our liberties, being with one mind resolved to die free men rather than to live as slaves. With a humble confidence in the mercies of the supreme and impartial God and ruler of the universe, we most devoutly implore his divine goodness to protect us happily through this great conflict and to dispose our adversaries to reconciliation on reasonable terms, and thereby to relieve the empire from the calamities of civil war. A long quote, but packed with amazing sentiments. Thomas Jefferson would be the governor of the state of Virginia in 1779. He said, public and solemn thanksgiving and prayer to Almighty God that he would in mercy look down upon us, pardon our sins, and receive unto us his favor. And finally, that he would establish the independence of these United States upon the basis of religion and virtue. He's writing this after the Declaration, but before the Constitution. And he's asking God to help us establish independence of the United States upon religion and virtue. That's the author of the Declaration of Independence there. Jefferson, again in 1815, sometime later, would say, "We are not in a world ungoverned by the laws and powers of a superior agent. Our efforts are in his hand and directed by it. And he will give them their effect in his own time." He's absolutely calling into acknowledgement the divine providence that was behind the founding of this country. Now, this is after the Constitution. I don't know how many people know of Joseph Story. Joseph Story was one of our greatest justices. And he, interestingly, was the son of one of the Boston Tea Party Indians. And that's a Boston event there, okay? And I think I have a slide here to show you an artifact from that. He went to Harvard and eventually became the Speaker of the House in Massachusetts. He was the founder of Harvard Law School and appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court at age 32. How many
So
32-year-olds?
one of the Indians that threw the tea in the harbor, or one of the
Yeah,
sons of the Indians that threw the tea in the harbor, founded the Harvard Law School.
yeah, yeah. His son did.
Okay.
Let's see here. He was appointed to the Supreme Court at 32. You know, I don't see any 32-year-olds on that court today. By the
Oh,
author of the First Amendment, James Madison, where he served for 34 years on the Supreme Court and helped establish the illegality of the slave trade in the Amistad case. So you can see the legal process on the abolition of slavery in play here. And he was, um, I don't know if he was full African, but I think may have been at least partially African. Obviously had a great opinion on that issue. Here's what he said in 1833 on his commentaries on the Constitution. We are not to attribute this prohibition of a natural religious establishment, the First Amendment, to an indifference to religion in general, and especially to Christianity, which none could hold in more reverence than the framers of the Constitution. Probably at the time of the adoption of the Constitution and of the amendment to it, now under consideration, the general, if not the universal sentiment in America was that Christianity ought to receive encouragement from the state, so far as was not incompatible with the private rights of conscience and the freedom of religious worship. So as long as your religious views are in line with our Christian founding, you should enjoy freedom of religion. And then he said that it was never the intent of the founders to forbid religious support from the federal government. It was to encourage it. Here's another quote he wrote. Christianity is not to be maliciously and openly reviled and blasphemed against. Well, that sounds like our day, doesn't it? To the annoyance of believers or the injury of the public, it is unnecessary for us, however, to consider the establishment of a school or college for the propagation of deism or any other form of infidelity. Such a case is not to be presumed to exist in a Christian country. So at this time, this was unheard of. This was a later infiltration of the, I can only ascribe it to a demonic infiltration of people outside this country that were looking for every Achilles heel, looking for every crack in the armor that they could attack. Slavery was one of those cracks in the armor. There were many others. Why may not laymen instruct in the general principles of Christianity as well as the ecclesiastics? Why can't the layman teach general principles of Christianity and not just the clergy? And we cannot overlook the blessings which such laymen, by their conduct, as well as their instructions, may, nay, must impart to their youthful pupils. This is encouraging Christian teaching in the universities. Why may not the Bible, and especially the New Testament, without note or comment, be read and taught as a divine revelation in the school? Its general precepts expounded, its evidence is explained, and its glorious principles of morality inculcated. What is there to prevent a work, not sectarian, upon the general evidence of Christianity from being read and taught in the college by lay teachers? It may well be asked, what is there in all this which is positively enjoined, inconsistent with the spirit or truth of the religion of Christ? Are not these truths all taught by Christianity, although it teaches much more? Where can the purest principles of morality be learned, or so clearly, so perfectly, as from the New Testament?
Wow.
Supreme Court Justice John Hancock wrote, resistance to tyranny becomes the Christian and social duty of each individual. Continue steadfast and with a proper sense of your dependence on God. Nobly defend those rights which heaven gave, and no man ought to take from us. Hancock said again, some boast of being friends to government. I am a friend to righteous government. That's a statement right there. And you can
Yeah.
do a study on our perversions of that in modern times, that we blindly have to follow government because all governments are created by God and our leaders are appointed by God. And that's talking about righteous government and no other. As long as as long as your government is righteous, it holds to biblical moral principles, then they are to be followed. Let us play the man for our God and for the cities of our God while we are using the means in our power. Let us humbly commit our righteous cause to the great Lord of the universe, who loveth righteousness and hateth iniquity. And having secured the approbation of our hearts by a faithful and unwearied discharge of our duty to our country, let us joyfully leave her important concerns in the hands of him who raiseth up and putteth down empires and kingdoms of the world, as he pleases, and with cheerful submission to his sovereign will.
Yes.
John Jay, another first justice of the Supreme Court. Providence has given to our people the choice of their rulers, and it is the duty as well as the privilege and interest of our Christian nation. What? Pastor Dave,
What? Our
what did he
Christian
just
nation.
say? In the interest of our Christian nation?
The first justice of the in the interest of our Christian nation. One
The
sentence. First
first
justice of the Supreme Court,
Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to select and approve
1816.
Christians for their rulers.
Tell me America was not founded on Christian principles. It says it right here and several other places. But people are trying to tell you a lie will be believed if you keep repeating it over and over and over and over again. What we're attempting to do with Michael Keating is to go back and say, that's not how it started. You're being told a lie. This is the truth. This is what they said.
Exactly. And, you know, it's like the detractors of this country looking for their Achilles heels, their cracks in the armor. One of those ploys that they resort to is asking the same question over and over again because they don't like the answer. This
Right.
question has been asked so many times and answered so many times, yet they still ask it today, and tomorrow they'll ask it again. Because once you prove that this was a Christian nation founded by Christians on Christian principles in the Bible, that's not an acceptable answer. If they figure if they keep asking it enough times, somehow the answer may change. But you know, it's never going to change as long as the people of this country keep what I'm putting in front of you before them. This is your answer to their attacks. John Jay said again, the most effectual mean of securing the continuance of our civil and religious liberties is always to remember with reverence and gratitude the source from which they flow. Well, what source is that? Go back to the previous slide. John Jay said again, the Americans are the first people whom heaven has favored with an opportunity of deliberating upon and choosing the forms of government on which they should live. You know, that's a great statement there. We don't realize the uniqueness of this process, of our experiment, that we are the first people who ever had the opportunity to form our representative government. Prior to this, William Federer has some great things on this about top-down government versus bottom-up government. I recall the video, but it's certainly one of the ones in the list that I forwarded. But this is a unique experiment. I don't know how many have ever heard it referred to on those terms.
It's the storm is
Ben,
really intense right now, but so far the power's up, the internet's up, so we're going to keep on going.
let me just see how many what slide I'm on here and how many I've left to go. And just get a windage guess or how much we've got here. What slide am I on? Slide 131. For 143. So we're close.
Everything's
Uh,
up. It's just I'm surprised it is, but it's thank you, Lord. You can't hear the rain falling on the roof, but it's we have a metal roof here, and it's just I'm surprised you can't hear it.
I think it goes more slides on that. So hold on. I think I got a accurate estimate there. I've got a total of 193 and we're on 131. So it's up to you, Pastor Dave, whether you think the storm is probably a good jumping off point. Do you want how long have we gone here, by the way?
Uh, we've got a couple of hours, I believe. What I'm
Okay.
concerned about is if this storm continues in its severity, we're going to lose our connection.
Yeah.
So we should probably determine a point where we can kind of continue into phase three because it's a pretty intense storm. I'm surprised we haven't had a power outage yet.
Okay. Let's do this then. This is the last slide in this quote section, and then we'll be on a cover slide for the next section where to pick up. And
Sounds
this
good.
is Benjamin Franklin's quote for a call for a general fast. Um, it gives some history of Franklin down here. Um, he published sermons with evangelist George Whitefield, and that is a colorful relationship, by the way. The relationship between Franklin and Whitefield. And Franklin was very drawn in by the teachings and the Second Great Awakening revival. Franklin printed a lot of that literature in that print shop that we visited today, where the location was. And of course, we know about his establishing the fire department, the public library, insurance companies, police forces, night watches, hospitals. He set up the lighting of city streets. He coined the term electric terms, positive and negative. Oh man, what we don't owe to Franklin just on a scientific basis. But he had a proposal for a general fast in the colony of Pennsylvania's council. And this is what he said. For as much as it is the duty of mankind on all suitable occasions to acknowledge their dependence on the divine being, to give thanks for the mercies received, and no less to deprecate his judgments and humbly pray for his protection. And as the calamities of a bloody war in which our nation is now engaged seem every year more nearly to approach us, and the expedition formed for the security of these plantations hath been laid aside, as the inhabitants of this province and city have been sorely visited with mortal sickness in the summer past, and there is just reason to fear that unless we humble ourselves before the Lord and amend our ways, we may be chastised with yet heavier judgments. Now, I'm going to pause right here. Thomas Jefferson today is often accused of being a deist. along with several of the other founding fathers. This is another point of attack, something that the detractors of this country, the enemies of America, throw around as a term to marginalize our founding fathers. And these are not the statements of a deist. Neither is the statement of that Franklin made at the Constitutional Convention one of a deist. A deist believes that, well, there might be a God. He's undeterminable. He may exist in the form of nature. He might be in the rock. He might be in the tree. He might be in the sky. Uh, but this God basically created the universe as it is. He has created natural laws, and he's wound it up and is letting it wind down and sitting back, observing all things, not to intervene, not to help, not to this. That's what a deist believes. Okay, what is Franklin calling for here? He's calling for an appeal to God for his protection. Now, that's a God that intervenes right there. That's going to intervene on our behalf. That's against the statement of the deist. And he's saying, unless we humble ourselves before him, we may be chastised with heavier judgments. So appealing to the Lord, there's a possibility that God will um, intervene. That's not what a deist believes. And we could do a whole defense on Franklin's own writings that will put that to rest. That he was not a deist. We have therefore thought fit, on due consideration, ever to appoint Thursday, the 7th day of January next, to be observed throughout this province as a day of fasting and prayer, exhorting all, both ministers and people, to observe the same with becoming seriousness and attention, and to join with one accord in the most humble and fervent supplications, that Almighty God would mercifully interpose and still the raging war among the nations and put a stop to the effusion of Christian blood, that he would take this province under his protection, confound the designs and defeat the attempts of its enemies. It is recommended to all persons to abstain from servile labor on this said day.
Wow, that's incredible. He is not a deist. This is not the prayer of a deist. Uh, this is a good place to wind up. And our founding fathers were Christian and they used Christian principles. And not only did they use Christian principles, they prayed for a Christian God who intervenes in the affairs of men to intervene in our affairs. What you're being fed is a lie by those progressives, by those people in America today and the world who say, hey, there is no God, it's just us. They are essentially deists. The clockmaker kind of built the clock, wound it up, and it's like watching a little toy just wander around on the floor and do whatever it's going to do. And go, oh, that's interesting, but not intervene. People are telling you there is no God and it's just all about us. In the last days, the Antichrist is when it's going to say there is no God other than us and other than me, as the Antichrist sets himself up on the throne. Don't buy in that lie. Our founding fathers didn't. Our founding fathers believed that there was and is a God who intervenes in the affairs of men. It's all over the writings, but they never talk to you about that. And quite frankly, I think there's an effort to hide that from you. That's why we're doing this.
Amen to that, Pastor Dave. The principles of the founding of our government, I think you can see by the quotes and what's been presented so far. There is no denying, absolutely no way anybody can make an argument to the contrary that this was a Christian nation established on Christian principles, biblical principles by Christians. And that is just the end of the story, but we got a little bit more coming and proof coming on that in the third session. We'll continue along those lines. But we're in a warfare. There have been times, there have been intervals, and I don't expect if I would go to Philadelphia now that to have the same experiences, but there have been times that I actually, had some concerns with even presenting material to this nature in that area because of the opposition strongholds that were set up around there. The opportunity for even physical violence to come your way. The people that were inhabiting those locations were there for a reason. They strategically attack the most important places of our founding and the heritage of this country. And I could give you instance after instance that from Provincetown Harbor in Massachusetts, which is a homosexual bastion now, to well, let's just put it till we get into it properly and to be able to couch some things. We'll leave it at that. But the bottom line is we're in a spiritual warfare, and where is the outcry among the Christian community? Where is where is the counterattack with this information that we're talking about and presenting on this program? Where is the counterattack with the truth? Was this is the truth,
And the truth
and
will set you free. Have
it
you
will
noticed
set
we're
you
wearing
free.
the same shirt? Oh no, yeah, we are. The Declaration of Independence shirt.
Yeah, and we are. Do you have a 250 yet?
Not with me today.
Yeah. Well, it's something that we're suffering the consequences in a sense of our own laxness, our own our founding fathers like Franklin. When somebody approached him and said after the convention, "Dear Mr. Franklin, what kind of government have you given us?" And he answered and said, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it,
You can keep it.
if you can keep it."
Now, I graduated high school in 1978, and students in my class, they would think of reasons to get out of American government class because they deemed it as boring. Oh, it's just government, social studies. Uh, so I grew up in 78, and when I was in middle school and grade school, we had social studies. We
Yeah,
learned about history. We learned about the world history, and the school system is trying to change that, and
yeah,
in many schools, they just do away with it. They don't want you to learn about it. It was interesting. I'll share this story with you. When I grew up, I was in middle school in Idaho, Payette, Idaho. And I can tell the name of the teacher. She's probably passed away by now. But she tried to teach us the Communist Manifesto. All right. Parents in Idaho, small town in Idaho, in probably 1975, 74, went to the school board and said, "You will stop teaching our kids the Communist Manifesto. We will not set for this as residents of Idaho, as citizens of Payette, Idaho. We won't allow this." And the school board went to the teacher and said, "You will stop teaching the Communist Manifesto or you will be fired." So she came to the students and said, "Well, your parents aren't going to let me teach this. We just need to learn it as an optional way of government." This was back in 1974 when there's some in the educational realm that were trying to teach us that. Back then, the parents said, "Not on my watch." So where are the parents today saying we need to teach American history? We need to speak up. That's why we're
yeah.
doing this. And because we need it. We desperately need. And then when you see man on the street interviews on Fox News or others, where they go out and they say, "Who was the first president of the United States?" And they'll say, Julius Irving or Richard Nixon or some stupid answer. They have
No.
no idea about how this government runs or how this country runs. And that is a sad state of affairs. But more importantly than that is this: those people vote. They don't understand what they're voting for. They don't understand how important
The
this
younger
country is.
generations are the future of the nation, and if we don't plant these seeds in them, then the country won't continue to grow as it was in its founding. And I'll challenge you, get a hold of the Communist Manifesto and read it and compare it to our country today. Compare it to our country today. When I talk about those detractors, the enemy of America that have come in and attacked. they haven't done, they've been done very strategically, and they've implemented almost every plank on that Communist Manifesto in some form or another. As they boiled the frog, by
Yeah.
boiling the frog,
Oh yeah. If you turn
you
the
do it
temperature up
slow enough, he
slowly,
won't jump out of the
he won't
pot.
even know he's getting fried.
Yeah,
You're getting fried. Uh, there's another saying: you can vote in communism, but you have to shoot your way out because once the government gets control, they have control, and the only way out is a revolution.
yeah,
We should not allow America to get in that position. And right now, we're seeing today, October 5th, 2026, we're seeing more and more socialists, avowed uh, socialists that are saying we're the Democrat Socialist Party. Uh, Now we don't want to talk about politics here, but we do want to talk about America and foundational principles on which this country is founded. And when you have a political party that's starting to embrace doing away with a co-equal branch of government, the Senate and the Supreme Court and the presidency, that is when you're shredding the Constitution. And that's when we as pastors and we as patriots, even with nonprofits, are saying, now, wait a minute, time out here, stop the presses. This is not America. And we should not allow that to happen on our watch. We need to stand up now.
yeah, absolutely. And what they're saying when these candidates are out there uh, with their speeches saying these kinds of things is they're saying this is the end of your America. We're going to take it apart, to dismantle it and shred it. And, if your original governing documents started the Supreme Court, if they started the Senate, the Congress, we're just going to shred them into ledge. Those people and those sentiments are more as dangerous, or if not more dangerous, than any standing army that could attack this country.
How will you give more power to we the people when you give more power to a single branch of government with no co equal governing authority or checks and balances? You shred the checks and balance and say the House of Representatives, the people's arm, will become the Politburo of America, and they choose the president and they just tell you what to do. And they're using terms like oligarchy and saying, well, the rich are getting richer. And that is that is the basic argument where they tried to push socialism and communism, is to take money away from the wealthy and give it to everyone else. That doesn't work. And we can talk for another 2 hours
Yeah.
about why not. And I've been doing podcasts for the last 6 months talking about the dangers of it and just explaining economics 101. If you take away the reward aspect of somebody going out and starting a business and you just let the government do it, governments don't create wealth. They tax and take away wealth.
Yeah.
Governments don't create anything. Governments tax and take away money from entrepreneurs who will start businesses, make money,
Yeah.
and invest. There is a reward for having a successful company. Government doesn't reward, they just steal from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They can't give you anything they didn't take from someone else.
So you'll hear phrases like top 1%, oligarchy, Donald Trump is bad and evil, and all the rich are getting richer, and you're having to pay the bills. And you need to dig deep into that argument. Uh, and we can allow you to have that argument. But when you talk about just destroying the basic foundational governing principle that has made America the successful nation that it has for the last 250 years, look at the success of America comparative to all the other nations. What other nation on the globe has been as successful as America? Why? Because I believe we put God first and we allowed we the people to really flourish. And you've allowed the American dream to exist, and you've allowed
Yeah.
entrepreneurs and inventors to come here and be rewarded for their dream and their businesses and allow them to grow. That's not happened in China. That's not happened in Venezuela. That's not happened in Cuba. It won't happen here if you go down the socialist road.
Absolutely. When I, one of my favorite things to do is just show up in Boston or Philly, and I don't get to do it hardly ever. But when I do, I go up there oftentimes after hours. Might have had a tour I was taking around, and then and I'll look for somebody that just engage and see if they want a little history tour or something. And you would be surprised how many times it's a group of Asian people, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, or it's a group of German, even Germans. I've had one group of Germans that I took. Uh, and why are they interested? Why are they looking at this type of government? Because here they can enjoy the fruits of their own labors. They can, and we can argue too about what illegal taxation has done to our country, because that's what we've been subjected to is illegal taxation, and things are going to be done about that shortly. But the thing about this is that what is the big catchphrase that you hear from everybody on the other side of this? That something is a threat to our
Democracy.
democracy.
There you
It's
go.
a threat to our democracy. And they have been saying that for 25 years, conditioning the American people to believe that we're a democracy, and we are not a democracy. A democracy and a republic are two different things. And you know what I'm going to do for the third session of this? I'm going to
Okay.
attack a section on the end of this on what our founding fathers said about democracy and what people said about democracy. And democracy is, supposed to be majority rules, mob rule, I call it. And a republic is different. A republic is rule by law. It's rule by law, not the rule by majority. And so what they're trying to do, the socialist candidates, the DSA candidates, is they're trying to distill our governmental structure down to one big Congress that will become rule by majority. It's going to be a Democrat process. It's going to be a democratic process.
Democracy.
Yeah. They are implementing a democracy and destroying the republic. And the audacity of them to come up and just say, we're gonna eliminate, you elect us to the office, this office, which is part of our governmental structure, then we're going to work to destroy that governmental structure. And they're openly stating it now, openly stating it. That is treason. They're traitors to our constitutional republic. There's no other way to slice it.
Democracy, true democracy is essentially mob rule, and the bigger the mob, the bigger the rule. And
Hmm.
that's the problem. You don't have the protection of the rule of law. You have only the wishes of the mob. So you
Yeah.
need a republic where your rights are guaranteed by the force of law and by the force of the court system. You have a true democracy, and it's literally mob rule, where the majority wins, and if the majority have drunk the Kool-Aid and they just think that, well, all the uh, for example, the shooting of the health executive in New York, celebrated by many. Let's shoot all the wealthy people. Uh, that's where we're headed, and we have to stop that. That is not Christian. That is not that is not the Christian ethos. It's not a republic. It's not the guarantee of personal rights. If there are companies taking advantage illegally, then those will be dealt with. But shooting all the rich people and just having mob rule is not going to fix the problem.
No, it won't. It'll exacerbate the problem. And then what we're seeing here emerge its ugly head is a boldness, a confidence by the socialists, by the enemies of this country to campaign in our own governmental offices with platforms that are destructive to the system and treasonous to the system. They have no fear at this point that they can't get up there and try to do that. Um, I don't know which of them, and I'm sure this will be one of the quotes I'll add in, but one of the I think it was one of the founders, said that democracy is two wolves in a land voting on what to have for dinner. See, the
That's a good.
democratic process is it's not that's not what we are. We are a constitutional public ruled by law. And if let's say for instance there's enough people out there that have drunk the Kool-Aid and they're even entertaining this, once they shred the Constitution, which defines the offices that they want to dismantle, I mean, they've been shredding the Constitution for years, but this is just the latest manifestation of it. Um, if they were to do something like that, um, well, wouldn't the Bill of Rights go along with that?
Part of
Would
the
you,
Constitution.
but won't you be giving up your Bill of Rights too? Let's see what life is like on this continent once your Bill of Rights are gone. Your freedom of speech, your freedom to be, secure in your possessions. You said, Pastor Dave, I like the car. You driving this. Give me the keys. I'm going to drive off with it. You say, well, you can't do that. Why? Because you're stealing. Well, by who says? Who says I'm stealing? By what law? The law we just trashed? And then what you're going to have is Mad Max. It's going to be, that's going to be our society is Mad Max where anything goes.
I
What,
know it's your car, but I need it more than you do. So give me the keys, and my club's bigger than yours.
well, that's the socialist mindset. Well, and you got a nicer one than I got, and that's that you shouldn't be able to do that. Everybody's got to be level on the playing field. The thing about socialism is that everybody pays into a core system, and then the system pays everyone out equally. Well, it never works that way.
Never works. No, because the people that are in charge of the money are greedy. That's why the founding fathers created a co-equal branch of government,
Exactly.
checks and balances, because they know that humans are by nature greedy. If we give, if, for example, the No Kings protest, what they're trying to do is put a king in charge in the form of the House of Representatives. And it's amazing that we want, they're just, they're doing the exact opposite of what they're telling you they're doing. They're saying they're protecting democracy, but in fact, they're destroying it.
Yeah. Well, it's certain storm clouds on the horizon for sure, but more than what you're facing there. But the the good news is it's waking some Americans up, and hopefully more people will latch on to programs like this one. And all I'm trying to do is not tell you what to think or how to think, but I'm putting the evidence in front of you, and in my humble opinion, there's only one conclusion that can be reached, unless you just are totally denying what the words on the page say.
Yeah. So one of the reasons, and I'm glad we found you because you have the information and the knowledge to be shared. I just checked my email. We still haven't heard from the institutions that are supposed to be the harbingers of truth and constitutional knowledge in America. They won't let us in the door. Uh, and that's why we're reaching out to people like Michael Keating who have the knowledge. And, hey, you don't agree with him? Look at the documents. You look up the documents. They'll say exactly the same. These are not documents that Michael created. These are the original documents. Go
Yeah.
find them. You'll find they say the same thing.
And so almost everything that I've shared in these presentations is credited, and you can look it up. And in many cases, you can find a high resolution scan in a library or an archive of the original document in their handwriting.
All righty. Looking forward to the next. How's the same time and date next week? Does that work for you?
Yeah, go ahead and schedule that, and I'm here.
Okay, we'll do it again. Hopefully, we won't have the delay in getting started and the technical issues. We had a problem. I'll just tell people we had a storm here yesterday that kind of messed up the technical side of it here, and we had to start about an hour late. Anyway, hopefully we won't have that next week.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Pastor Dave, for providing the platform and the opportunity to come out and get this information out. It's so vital.
If you have any questions for Michael or comments to me, you can send me an email at dave@streetlevelamerica.com, dave@usaheartbeat.com, or dave@classroomusa.net. We're here to share the truth and the history that is America. Unfiltered, it's just this is what the paper says, this is what the documents say. Like the archaeologists say, like we talked, I coined a phrase the other day, constitutional archaeology.
Yeah.
Let's just dig into the documents and see what the documents have to say. This is what
Oh,
they say.
Pastor Dave, I've got to put that on top of those two slides because that's what I showed today with some constitutional archaeology. I would help me remember that phrase.
Constitutional archaeology. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah,
But there's
that'll be
lots.
on those slides next time.
Okay. There are other organizations trying to do that. We want to be a chorus of voices saying, this is what our founding fathers say. This is what our documents say. This is why they did it. There is a God in heaven. He does intervene in the affairs of men, and he desperately needs to intervene in our affairs. So, Michael, we are looking forward to next week's session and many more sessions in the past, because as we dig up all of this history that is America, hey, folks, this is the truth. The Bible says the truth will set you free. You're being fed a lie, and we're trying to uncover that lie with the truth. Michael, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Classroom USA, USA Heartbeat, and Street Level America. I'm Dave Adams. This is America. That's what we think. And we say on Street Level America, this is a phrase we like to use, cowboy up, America. They say that whenever the cowboy gets kicked off a bucking bronco or a bucking horse or a bull. Just cowboy up, dust off, get back on, and let's ride.
Get
Have a
your
good
shirt
day.
on.
Have a good day. God bless America.
God bless America.